Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 153, Part 2, Dr. Ken Nordberg and the Whitetail Hunter's Almanac, 2nd edition. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Kyle Rosner from Back to the Outdoors, and you're listening to my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry, Deer Hunting Podcast.
This is Nick Percy from Killer Food Plots, and you're listening to my favorite deer hunting podcast, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
I'm Fred Eichler, and you're listening to my favorite podcast on iTunes, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. You know, I'm psyched you're joining us. I'm psyched every week when you tune in. I don't know if you are a frequent listener, but if you are, I want to say thank you for pushing that play button and give me an hour of your ear. If you're just a newbie to this show and you're learning, just go check out some of our apps. Like if you've got an iPhone, go to bigbuckregistry.com/app and you can download that app and you'll be able to get every single show right on your phone whenever you want. If you have an Android or a Google phone, maybe try the other app, and that's bigbuckregistry.com/GAPP. And then you can get them all right there at your fingertips whenever you want. Bottom line is, I just want to say thank you for tuning in to our show, the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast powered by USA Trail Cams. And I got a feeling that there's this other guy over here that would also like to say thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Every week we produce a show and we try to do the best we can with the sound quality, Jay, and the content. And we do. We appreciate everybody for tuning in week after week after week after week with us right here on the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. And I tell you, it wouldn't be right if we didn't have a show come out every Saturday, Jay.
And it's kind of part of the tradition now. And I wouldn't have it any other way. And we're going to keep doing this as long as we possibly can. I got to tell you, though, our downloads are at an all-time high. It's blowing my mind.
That's fantastic. We appreciate the downloads.
Yes, we do. So keep downloading the show, keep pushing play, keep listening, and thank you for supporting our sponsors, by the way. So this week, Dusty, we're going back. We're going back to Dr. Ken Nordberg, the Whitetail Hunter's Almanac, edition number 2. We're visiting the last 4 phases of the rut as described by Dr. Ken Nordberg. We went through his entire kind of background and phase 1 last week, but we're going to pick up where we left off. And we're going to go right into phase 2, Dr. Ken Nordberg. Before we do that, Dusty, let's turn to Jim Keller with the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. Robinson Outdoors responds to jury's verdict in court case. This article was reported by the Deer and Deer Hunting website. ScentLock Technologies won a jury verdict in federal court against Robinson Outdoor Products for its advertising of scent blocker Trinity scent control products. ScentLock asserted that Robinson made false advertising claims through a national campaign. Robinson Outdoor Products has responded, and here is the press release. To our friends, customers, pro staff, retail partners, and fellow hunters. As many of you have heard, last week a Michigan Federal District Court case concluded with a verdict of false advertising by Robinson Outdoor Products for the company's introductory advertising of scent blocker Trinity scent control technology. The case raised a fundamental question from the very beginning. After 35 years of business and 15 years of manufacturing and marketing scent blocker activated carbon scent control apparel and dominating the category, why would we sacrifice what made us successful by introducing scent blocker Trinity technology with false claims that would jeopardize all that we had worked for so tirelessly to build? We communicated scientific and verifiable facts as we knew them to be. We were fully aware that other hunting apparel companies would scrutinize every word. What purpose would unsubstantiated claims have served? The answer is none. We wouldn't have. For us to knowingly make false claims would have hurt our scent blocker brand, our customers, our employees and their families, our investors, and our retail partners far more than they would have hurt any competitor. As the court requires of any jury in order to reach a verdict, this jury had to listen to, digest, and try to understand hundreds of pages of scientific data, as well as long hours of tedious testimony from company leaders and expert witnesses on both sides over a period of 2 weeks. It would have been a daunting challenge for a jury made up of experts. We respect the challenge this jury had before them, however, we firmly disagree with the outcome. And while the jury's verdict is in, please realize this case is not over. Going forward, Robinson Outdoor Product and Scent Blocker will continue to innovate products for our thousands of loyal customers who count on our apparel, liquid scent control products, and attractants to fuel their love for the outdoors and improve their comfort and success in the field. Respectfully, Scott Schultz, President, CEO, Robinson Outdoor Products. South Dakota's study checks survivability of youngest deer. This article was originally reported by the Black Hills Pioneer. Wildlife officials with the South Dakota Game, Fish, and Parks have been busy for the last week capturing and collaring newborn deer fawns with radio collars. This past week was likely the peak of birthing activity by does and requires many people in the field trying to capture the young animals as part of the survivability study. Chris Cudmore, a resource biologist with the GF&P, said the goal is to collar 150 deer in the Black Hills and surrounding prairie. The department's staff began capturing deer on June 6, and based upon last year, the peak would be June 13th or 14th for whitetails. Mule deer will see the peak fawn activity a couple days later. The process of catching and collaring typically takes less than 3 minutes. The collars are small, nylon-type straps that have pleats sewn into them. As the collars are exposed to the elements, they begin to break down, and the pleats rip apart as the fawn's neck grows, until 9 months to a year later when a collar becomes very loose. It will eventually snag on a branch or something and get ripped off. Researchers are then able to retrieve the small transponders. This project is expensive, but deer are our most sought-after species, Cudmore said. The study behind collaring the fawns is to get an estimate of how many fawns survive to their first year. By that time, they can find food on their own and survive. For further details on this study, please check our show notes or www.bhpioneer.com. 5 common myths about whitetail fawns. This article was originally reported by Brian Murphy on QDMA.com. It's early June, and social media is abuzz with photos of recently born fawns from across the country. While we love seeing these reports of successful whitetail breeding efforts, the ensuing discussion often leads to misinformation regarding whitetail fawns. So today we wanted to address 5 of the most prevalent fawn myths. The first one: a fawn is abandoned because there is no doe in sight. This is simply the whitetail's predatory avoidance strategy. Fawns spend their first 3 to 4 weeks hiding before they routinely follow their mothers. Number 2, fawns are odorless. This is false, as their unique scent is how their mothers identify them. In fact, they urinate on their tarsal glands daily, even when just a few days old. Number 3, a set of twin fawns are always from the same father. This is also false. Research has documented that about 25% of all sets of twin fawns come from different fathers. There has even been a case of triple paternity documented where a set of triplets was sired by 3 different bucks. Number 4, there are more female fawns born than males. Again, false. In fact, male fawns tend to slightly outnumber female fawns. Number 5, once you pick up a fawn, its mother won't take it back. Research has clearly shown that handling a fawn, even for a few minutes, has no impact on whether its mother will accept it. Just return it to where you found it and leave. So next time you are discussing fawns with your family and friends, please share these fun facts. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. If you have any ideas for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Here is part 2 with the doc.
So let's go on to phase 2, and I'm going to have Dusty cover this. And phase 2 is the breeding range establishment.
Let's talk about the dates and duration of the phase 2 of the rut.
Well, here in Minnesota, that begins with the first 32 degrees at night, and that's usually mid-October sometime. There's been years where we didn't get that cold weather, and we don't see many antler rubs or brown scrapes in the woods as a result. But in a normal year, we do, and then we'll see plenty of brown scrapes and antler rubs. But this is a period when 90% of antler rubs and almost 100% of brown scrapes are made. And it's a period that a lot of hunters refer to as the peak of the rut, but it isn't the peak of the rut. Now, all these bucks, they've been battling, and despite the fact that they have a pecking order all set up, every one of them is kind of, instinctive in them, wants to establish a breeding range. And to establish a breeding range, they have to mark them. They have to mark them in a way that tells other bucks, this is my breeding range. And they have two signs that they use for that. And one is an antler rub. And I won't go in, younger bucks usually rub on smaller trees, and I won't go into why now, but, and bigger bucks on bigger trees, on trunks of bigger trees. And they put a lot of work into what they do. What they're doing is rubbing off the outer bark and exposing the wood or inner bark that's really light in color, something that can be seen way over there. Any buck walking through this area is sure to see that thing over there. It's all white and bright. And not only do they make those marks, but they rub scalp musk on there. It's this pungent musk odor. And the bigger the buck, the more they have of that. One of the signs of a dominant breeding buck is wrinkled fur on their necks. This musk, these glands in their scalps that are producing this stuff are producing so much of it, it runs down the sides of their faces and onto their necks, and it gets stiff on the necks, and it kind of dries there. When they turn their heads from the side to side, they create these vertical wrinkles in the neck, and that's one of the signs of a big dominant buck. You see a lot of wrinkles in the side of the neck, but to them, that's an important odor, and they rub that all over that antler rub as well. And they frequently renew those rubs throughout this period until breeding begins in early November. But a big buck might make 30, 40 of those throughout its range. And when they are spending, they still go back and spend time in their own individual bedding areas. And in bedding areas, they can make a whole cluster, like 6 to 12 and sometimes 30 antler rubs in one small area, which is a buck bedding area. That's the principal sign of a buck bedding area, where you find clusters like that of these. And the size of the antler rub tells you what size of a buck made all those. Although big bucks can make antler rubs in 3-inch trees and even 2.5-inch trees, but if there's 6-inch trees, 4 to 6-inch trees rubbed in that area, those are the ones that tell you that's a big buck that's bedding in this area. But at any rate, that's one of their signs. And the other is the ground scrape. And on this, they make them visible too by pawing away turf and making a spot on the ground. The bigger bucks can make some pretty big ones. I've got pictures of some that are 10 feet in diameter, and I just photographed one last fall at 10 feet long and maybe 2 feet wide. Some of them make 2-3 rubs in the same little area, and or scrapes. Now, when they do that, an older buck will do a little extra work at a ground scrape. He'll often, especially when we start getting closer to breeding, and their testosterone levels are starting to peak now, and they're getting pretty aggressive. But they aren't satisfied with just making pawing turf away. They'll rub scalp musk on branches overhanging the ground scrape, and in the process, some of them even thrash those branches, and pieces end up laying on the ground scrape on the ground. And but those branches there are covered with the scalp musk, and when you find ravaged branches over a large ground scrape, you're probably looking at the ground scrape made by the biggest buck in your hunting area. At any rate, getting back to the ground scrape, after they paw away the turf and leaves and stuff burying the earth, then they'll plant all 4 of their feet on the ground scrape, and they'll press their hind legs together. The tarsal glands are on the insides of their hind legs, and they press those together to express musk. And some of them, not all of them, will do kind of a hula dance which helps to, they got these glands pressed together and they're getting rubbed and more musk comes out. And all the while they're doing that, they're urinating on their hind legs. And the urine carries that musk to the ground scrape. That's how it gets down there. And anyway, the most dominant buck in there will make the largest ground scrapes, and he'll make his rubs on the largest diameter trees. And all the other bucks in the area know just by those characteristics, plus the fact that they probably have stronger odors of scalp musk and tarsal musk on those signs that tell the other bucks these are the signs made by the big buck. Well, at this point, they don't just do that. The big buck now, he doesn't want all those bucks in his breeding area. And so when we get into the last week or so, 2 weeks of phase two, phase two, his job is going to be cruising his range, searching for and running off any other antlered bucks that are on his range. And most of those other bucks, except yearlings, will find some secluded little areas off range, sometimes in the range too, where the buck doesn't travel very often. But little areas like little islands and swamps and places like out in bogs where there's highlands, and they'll remain there all during from the beginning from late October until phase three is over, the first phase of the first breeding period of the year. But some of them will sneak back early, and some of them are really big bucks that are destined to be dominant, and they'll come back and maybe fight with the big buck about who gets what here. But at any rate, from this time on, one of the jobs that the dominant breeding buck is keeping all those lesser bucks out of his breeding range. And has more trouble with yearlings than any of the others, because yearlings are still dependent on their mothers, yearling bucks, for direction and leadership in times of danger. And of course, if a hunting season's going on, there's lots of danger. And the big buck is also dangerous. It gets run off by the big buck. The first inclination of a yearling buck is to head back to where her mother is, because he doesn't know quite what to do about all this. So they're kind of a thorn in the side for the big dominant bucks. But most of the other bucks will stay off range during this period. And you won't see a lot of bucks in the field hunting while breeding is occurring. Not until breeding is over, and all of a sudden, holy cow, there's lots of bucks out here right now again. So, and a lot of those ground scrapes that were made by lesser bucks become old. They aren't renewed anymore. Once they run off, the only scrapes and rubs that are renewed are the ones made by the dominant breeding buck. So anyway, that's all in preparation for breeding, which will be coming up shortly. And the dominant buck is also spending a lot of time exploring his range to find out where the does are and where they're feeding. So once that first whiff of pheromone gets into the air, he knows where to go. But I won't talk about that much yet. But that's pretty much what happens during phase two, which lasts in Minnesota. It lasts until November 3rd.
Gotcha. What's the size of a breeding range for a mature buck, a dominant buck?
Well, most of them, in the forest areas, most of them there are only a square mile in size. It's not really square. It's most of them are kind of oblong, but it amounts to a square mile. And that's about all a buck can handle. That's about the largest area that he can keep to himself, keep the other bucks out of it, and mark it and breed and all that. There are some bucks that will have larger ones. Forest area bucks will have up to 2 square miles, but that isn't a real common thing for a big dominant buck to have a 2 square mile range, but some do. And that doubles the number of does that will be bred during that time. And it doubles the job of keeping all those other bucks out of there while this is going on. So, big job. That's part of why, that's the beginning of why big dominant bucks can lose up to a third. I've never known any to lose up to a third, but I've read that this is what happens. But they lose quite a bit of weight. They get pretty wore out. They get kind of red-eyed and with their head down and walking up proud with their head up much, unless they're in company with other deer. But they get pretty wore out by the time breeding comes, and there's a lot more ahead of them, that's physically demanding. So
right.
Hard time for them.
So when you're hunting a buck in phase two, is there a recommended spot or a method and lures that you should be using?
Well, you hunt ground scrapes. I used lures for years. I did a ton of research with lures. I developed some of the early methods of using lures, and that were used all over the country. But, lures got used to death. And our rule, my hunting partners and our rule is don't use any at all. Wild dominant bucks are maintaining ground scrapes, renewing them, or making them and ruining them. Nothing will keep them from stopping that except bad weather, strong winds, or stormy weather, or a hunter. They're pretty good at identifying hunters near those things. So-called moss scrapes, I never could figure those out. I did all kinds of research with that, and people will, scrape places in the woods and then put doe and estrus lure scent. And I used to do that. I still use doe and estrus lure scent once in a while for some study I'm doing, and learn good ways to do it. But back in the mid '80s, I had a job putting together a video series called Whitetail Hunter's World. It's a 12-hour series. And when we made that series, my God, the number of deer we saw, bucks we saw, that came to doe and estrus lure scent. It was phenomenal. I mean, we got virtually every buck in those videos were just full of big bucks all over the country. They're Minnesota, Wisconsin, Virginia, New York, South Carolina, all over the place. And one guy and he was the cameraman, and we got more photography of bucks and other deer during that period than any time. And it was amazing how effective that was. You could do just about anything with it. Drag a rag soaked with that stuff through the woods and create a trail a deer would follow. But they don't do that anymore. It got to the point already by the early 90s that we weren't seeing many older bucks. We were seeing primarily yearling bucks using that scent. But rather than create a man-made ground scrape somewhere and put doe and estrus lure scent on it, and that's kind of crazy idea too. I think the people who came up with that scent, some of them were saying, well, does pee on buck ground scrapes to tell the bucks when they're in estrus, which is crazy because once a doe starts producing that odor spreads widely over a huge area. Bucks have no trouble finding does, and does don't just sit around ground scrapes waiting for bucks either. A doe in estrus, if she doesn't have a buck soon, she'll go looking for the buck. But anyway, that was the idea, and people are still doing that. And but the best ground scrape in the woods is the one that is being regularly freshened by the big downwind buck. And, if you hunt crosswind or downwind, a good section of that trail, I mean, it can't be just here, because they're going to be smelling you 200 yards downwind if you're not careful. No scrape in the woods is better for bow hunting during that time. And don't do a darn thing. Don't get close to that trail. Stay 20 yards away from it. You get in the tree, that's good times to be in the tree stand. And because you got a better shot angle without interference from brush and branches and other things. But at any rate, but the buck's own ground scrape is the best lure you can have. And if you hunt 2 days at such a site and not see that buck, then you assume he knows I'm here. So we'll find another one to sit, like go 200, 300, 400 yards away and onto another freshly made scrape and watch that one. And but ground scrapes, that's all you need to know during that phase of the rut. Phase 2, just not ground scrapes.
For sure. Yeah. Let me ask, will unseasonably warm temperatures have an effect on this phase?
Yeah, it does. I should have mentioned that too. If it, they get their winter fur. Our bucks, where I hunt, boy, if it starts getting much over 40 degrees during the day, they just want to lay in shade somewhere during the daylight hours, and then they don't become active until it gets cool at night, and then they'll become active. And if it's warm at night, they may not be active then either. In a year where you don't get that cool weather early like you normally do, you might not have any brown scrapes at all out in the woods, and very few antler rubs. And we've seen years like that as well. But unseasonably warm weather can shut it down as well. So that's not. I've been through plenty of seasons where that was going on, and then the bucks were weren't hardly moving during daylight hours at all. So anywhere.
Right. You get into a little bit about temporary range. Tell us what is a temporary range, and is there any method that you can hunt that?
Where these other bucks go?
Yeah, just a temporary range that.
Well, the lesser bucks that have been chased off by the dominant bucks.
Gotcha. Okay.
Where I hunted for years, bow hunting and gun hunting, I was in Aiken County here in Minnesota, and a lot of bogs and aspen forests, a lot of evergreens in that area. It was easy to figure out where the lesser bucks were going, and there's in the bogs, there were little, what we called islands. They were little highlands that had aspens on them and spruce and balsam trees and cedar trees and that kind of thing. And these bucks would get on there, and there might be only one or two, really noticeable trails on those places. But while they were out there, they would make antler rubs all over the place along that trail, and maybe every 10, 20 yards I've seen it like that, where antler rubs and brown scrapes all over the place. And while they're out there, they'll regularly renew those. They're going up and down those things, and they were hard to get close to, and we had to make. I remember there were places where we used to lay poles across mud so we could cross that, where we could get close to these islands where you could see a section of those trails. But anytime the wind was favorable, so you could get close to one of those without being smelled, your chances of taking a buck on those kind of places were really excellent. It was almost a sure thing. And some of those bucks were pretty decent. But there were other places, and it was always heavy cover, really thick cover where they would hide out during that time. And there were usually not a lot of trails in those kind of places. A lowland, ash slough, for example, and cedar swamps with little islands in them, and alder swamps with little islands in them that would be stuck out there. But, sometimes there could be a lot of deer on one of those, and even the does, they would get out there, and that way they managed to get bred if they were chased off range, and they'd get on these little islands. But we did pretty well on those for years until we decided, we'd rather hunt where the really big bucks were, and so we kind of let up on those. But that's even true today. We have several places. We don't have that big bog country where we hunt now. It's a lot of highland, but there are places that the cover is really thick, and where the big buck doesn't travel, they don't have ground scrapes or antler rubs along these trails, and some of them are close to big swamps and bogs along edges, places like that. Gotcha. And there's always some deer there, off range. And usually when they're chased off range, they don't go a great distance. It's going to be fairly close. But most of them are in places you don't want to go. I mean, you go there and you say, "Oh, this is terrible out here." And how do you get close to them? And to see them, you have to know where to go and not try to get too close. You got, and you want to be downwind or crosswind and that kind of thing. So you have to know. This is part of what we always look for when we're scouting. So that's part of the scouting job.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, good deal. We covered into phase 2 of the rut. Jay, you want to get into phase 3, the primary breeding phase?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, Doc. Let's get into phase 3 here.
Well, phase 3, call it the primary, is because 85% of does roughly are bred during that period. And there's some things you should know about the does, the breeding. Most hunters don't realize this, but a doe is only in heat. Another way to say it's only in estrus for 24 to 26 hours, just a little short period. And the bucks got to find the does, and if they don't, well, the does will find the bucks. But if they're going to be bred, they got to be bred during that 24 to 26 hours. And once they're, the pheromone comes, it's carried to the outside via their urine, and it gets on their back end of their body and wherever they urinate, and it's an odor that bucks can readily smell up to 200 yards or more downwind. So, but usually they don't, they're pretty active at finding one another during this period. Now, in any square mile, only about 10 to 12% of those are in heat on any one day. And there can be some days when none of them are in heat. What that means is, like, if in a square mile that I like to hunt, and we kind of divide up our area where my hunting partners and I hunt, but I've got a square mile of my own. In that square mile, that means only 1 or 2 does are likely to be in heat on any one day. And there'll be some days they won't, and then another day there'll be 1 or 2, and they're all over the place in this square mile. They each have their own home ranges during that site in that area, and that doe home range is usually only about 125 acres in size. And but they sometimes have common feeding areas that they all go to if they're close to it. But the bucks, the breeding bucks, can be here one day and a mile away the next because of this, and it's really hard to figure out where they are on any one day, because you might find them here one day, but the next day that's the end of it. They're somewhere else, and either looking for a doe in heat or with a doe in heat. And a lot of times when you got a couple of does in heat, the one that the buck or the doe can't find, or the buck, when he's with a doe in heat, he won't leave that doe as long as she's in heat. And any other does there in heat has to come and find the buck. But he stinks so bad they can smell him probably 200 yards away as well, because he's just loaded with musk. But at any rate, so the doe will, this one time when the doe will go off range and enter another doe's range without having problems from the other doe that's in heat. So sometimes there'll be 2 does in heat along with their young, like, a yearling doe in the fawn or a couple of fawns. And when you see that kind of thing, you think, holy cow, look at all the does out there. It's like a harem. We had a buck in Aiken Colony that regularly had a breeding range 2 square miles in size, and we've seen as many as 11 antlerless deer with that buck during this particular phase of the rut. But back in the old days, I used to think it's hopeless to try to hunt bucks, big bucks, especially dominant bucks, during this period, because there's so much movement going on, in addition to what's caused by weather and hunting and all kinds of things. But at any rate, and wolves where I hunted, well, the wolves have a big effect on what our deer are doing. But anyway, so I used to look forward to the 17th of November. It was usually right toward the end of our firearm hunting season, because at that point, as soon as breeding is over, the big dominant bucks would head back to their bedding areas, the ones they lived in all summer. They need rest and time to recuperate from all that's been going on up to that time. They've been really physically beat up from that whole period, and they need rest, and they'll go back to that. And that's when I would usually take big bucks back in the old days. But today, we've gotten to be pretty good at taking bucks all through the breeding phase by keying on does. And, we can't tell by the looks of a track whether a doe's in heat or not. But if you got a week to hunt, or 10 days or 2 weeks like we usually have, you're going to hit the jackpot eventually by sticking with adult does. So that sticking with those 3-inch tracks, the fresh ones, and 1/2-inch droppings, near feeding areas. We hunt feeding areas constantly. No place else, just feeding areas, because that's the place where you can see them moving around, doing things. And there's the buck with the doe. And even at times, there could be nothing out there, and along comes this great big buck. He's searching for a doe and estrus, and he's going through that feeding area where does have fed in the past, and I took one last year that was doing that, and so anyway, we hunt doe feeding areas all during this period, and we do well at it, and we take our designated limit. We only take 3 or 4 mature bucks a year in my game, and that's all the best that we care to have. And usually one of them is a big dominant breeding buck, and sometimes 2. And but that's what we do during that period. Okay. And this lasts, in Minnesota until the 17th of November. So it's a 2-week period, the 3rd to the 17th, and that's the way we hunt them, and we're good at it. And that's when we key on those big tracks, really fresh. Not only does that mean that deer is near, but he's probably smelling or he's heading toward a doe in heat. And in this feeding area over here, where we're going to hunt next, so even if you discover the track at noon, which means, well, they aren't going to be there. They're going to be in the doe bedding area at noon. But they'll probably be, I'm almost certain they'll be back there in the evening. And if you do things right, you have to hunt crosswind late in the day because they always come from downwind. And if you're sitting downwind, you aren't going to see any deer in that feeding area. So you want to be crosswind, and you got to be careful about that too because your scent spreads out quite a bit as it goes downwind and covers a huge area, pie-shaped area downwind. So wherever you sit, crosswind, it's got to be at a place where that downwind angle isn't going out into the feeding area. But this is why we always do much better in the morning. we go in the dark to our stands in the morning. We usually get to our stands at first light or just before first light or a half hour before first light. Because, if there's deer out there feeding, and if you manage to get there without alarming them, and if you do it right, you shouldn't, but they might be curious for a half hour after it's silent where you are, and you aren't moving, and then eventually you might see those deer come back. Now, we make that a little hard on ourselves because we learned, in the last 10 years, a stand site that's right on the edge of a feeding area, like let's say a farm field or a clear cut, is bad, whether it's in a tree or on the ground. We've learned that, you want to be 15, 20 yards back in the woods, ground level. I'm going to give one of those pop-up tent-like camel ground lines that they're selling a lot of nowadays. I've never used one. I'm going to give that a try. But even that, you don't want it on the edge because they have a shape. Now, it might fool a turkey, but it won't fool a dominant buck. Gotcha. You got to hide your blind as well as yourself if you're going to use such a thing. And but we don't see as many deer out in the clear cut sitting between 10, 20, or 15 yards back in the woods. But if you're sitting on the edge, boy, do they get you, those mature deer, do they get you? I had those do a clinic on me this last year showing me how they could do that. And they did more things that day to show me, boy, they knew exactly where I was, and no matter how well hidden I was and wearing a camel head and that kind of thing. But if you stay back in the woods, they aren't going to get you. And you'll get just as shot. Well, you'll get more shots at older bucks when you do that than you would ever when you sit right on the edge of such a place. So whether on the ground using natural cover or in one of those tents, that tent's got to be hidden too. It's got to be mixed in with natural cover in order to be effective.
Very nice.
Well, and within easy shooting range of very fresh tracks and or droppings of a big buck.
Right.
So that's what you got to have too. Otherwise, I absolutely hate sitting anywhere that is not within easy shooting range of tracks or droppings of a big buck. I've got to have that. If I don't have that, I don't want to even sit there.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right, so Doc, let's move on to phase 4, the recovery. And Dusty, you want to take phase 4?
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Sure.
Well, recovery phase is, it lasts about 2 weeks, and it takes that long for a big dominant buck to become to recover from what he's been through since 1st of September. They had to, then during the first week after they get there, they hardly do anything, and they just stay put. And curiously, as soon as breeding is over and they figure it's time to go get a rest, they change their attitude toward other bucks. And other bucks are starting to come back now, too, because all during the time that he's been breeding, he hasn't had much time to renew the musk odors and appearances of ground scrapes and antler rubs that mark his breeding range. And some of these other bucks are thinking, well, it must be safe to go back now because there's no sign that he's been around here for a long time. And yearling bucks keep coming back anyway. But anyway, when the buck, when breeding is over and no more pheromone from does and heat in the air, most of the other bucks, and it doesn't take long, it's only a matter of sometimes just a day, one night, they start coming back at night. All kinds of other bucks will come back and start living in their normal home ranges. Now, buck home ranges overlap a lot. Doe home ranges don't; they never overlap. But buck ranges do, and they have much larger ranges than does. Does have 125 acres, and most of the mature bucks will have at least 300 acres, and you can't have 5 of them living in a square mile unless their ranges overlap. So they overlap a lot. So anyway, and the big buck doesn't care. From this point on, he's not going to try to defend his breeding range. He's bred 85% of the does, and he's tired, and the heck with it. And any of the other does, he'll look for them later on, but he won't be as anxious to find other does, and he won't be as aggressive to other bucks from that time on. But after about a week, sometimes less, he'll start feeding again, and he'll like to feed where the does are feeding. They're feeding on browse. Of course, they started on browse way back where I hunt. They started on browse the second week in November, but he knows where to go. But at that point, he starts using other deer for the first time. He's pretty careless about this when he's with does and estrus. He allows other deer to be the sentinels for danger. And he doesn't get over this. When he wants to start feeding after breeding is over, he'll usually follow in the tracks of a doe and its young, wherever they feed. He might feed with them. He might stay back a couple 100 yards, which is not uncommon, and just keep track of them. And if they start showing signs of that something dangerous is near, he'll get out of there without being in danger himself. But that's a typical thing for these older bucks at this time. And so by the second week, he's starting to explore his range again and starting to walk on trails. And he won't necessarily renew ground scrapes, but I found that several times during previous years when I found older ground scrapes covered with snow or on the ground there. They're bare and they haven't been covered with snow yet, or they still have leaves in them or something like that. If I kick snow on the ground scrape or leaves or anything like that, the buck might come along, and if he sees that, he might bear that scrape there, and he'll paw off that stuff that I put on there. So I know he's been there, but otherwise he wouldn't touch it. He'd just walk by his old scrapes and won't do much in that regard. So he's pretty much done with that at this point. So, but now every doe that is not bred during phase 3 of the rut will experience estrus 28 days later. And if they're not bred then, they'll experience estrus 28 days later than that. So they'll have breeding going on in December, and they will have breeding going on in early January. Now, of course, then we're getting into what I call the supplemental breeding phase. That includes the last 2 periods when those breed and during those later periods. But anyway, phase 4 is not. There's nothing really exciting about it except in the old days I used to get bucks in their home bedding areas. That was my principal place to hunt them during that phase. My hunting partner and I don't hunt bucks in bedding areas anymore. We used to do that a lot. And because, for one thing, it's awfully hard to get close to one, whether the buck is there or not. It comes later or the buck is there. It's hard to get close to one without the buck knowing it, because they set up all kinds of things, traps. When they lay down facing downwind, watching their back trail quite a ways away. And then they follow a fishhook pattern that if you follow their tracks, you end up, and they go jump over things, dead fallen tree with dead branches on it, things like that. So you're going to make noise. That's another kind of trap. And finally, you're led to a point where you're actually upwind where they're really bedding. So it's pretty hard to get close to a big buck in a bedding area without the buck knowing it. And he'll slip out of there without you even realizing he was there, except see that bed looks awfully fresh there. And they did trot or bounded away. They like to trot. It's a lot quieter. They don't make as much noise as they do when they're bounding. So bucks are more inclined to freeze and cover and move quietly away. Other deer are more inclined to bound when things get tough, but big bucks aren't likely to do that. But anyway, so we learned that if we alarm a big buck in its bedding area, it's almost certain he's gone for the season. He'll go off range, and you won't see that buck anywhere. You won't find his fresh sign anywhere throughout the rest of the hunting season. Mm-hmm. And some of them never come back. Maybe they get shot when they get off range or something, but some of them never come back once that happens. So we don't like to alarm our bucks by hunting bedding areas. One of the things we want to do when we scout is find out where those bedding areas are, and so we can stay away from them. Any trails we use will be, give them a wide berth, and that encourages our bucks to stay with us throughout the hunting season. So we don't do that anymore. So that's basically all there is to know about phase 4.
Gotcha. Is there any anything that we need to eliminate when we're hunting as far as shiny surfaces and bright colors and tones and throughout the phase 4?
Well, yeah, I've been an advocate of camo blaze orange for years for gun hunting, and I know I used to have some friendly arguments at sports shows in Wisconsin about people who thought there was probably a lot of accidental shootings because people were wearing camo blaze orange, but in going through, all the reports about accidents for years and years and years, I could find none that were attributable to wearing camo blaze orange. So my cap is camo blaze orange. My coat, my bibs, if it's cold enough, they're camo blaze orange. So now to a deer have a lot of color receptors in their eyes, and they can see most colors. Well, for some strange reason, they don't have color receptors for colors in the red spectrum. And so they see things that are red in tones of white to gray to black. Well, like back in the old days when we used to, when I first started hunting, we were wearing buffalo plaid out there in the woods. That was legal. And so that was pretty good camouflage. The black was hard to see in the woods, and the red was kind of a dark gray. Now, if you take a black and white picture of somebody that's wearing camo or blaze orange clothing, it looks bright white. I mean, it's really bright. And a person wearing, blaze orange out in the woods that's on the move is readily seen by deer. Yeah, they might only get glimpses of them, especially on a sunny day. That blaze orange just glows out there. So it's like you got a spotlight on you the whole time you're moving around out there. Camo blaze orange isn't so bad. That's a lot better. Now, with bow hunting, there's you need to be careful there too, especially hunting deer and bear. Bear have poor eyesight, but by golly, if your camel has bright markings, if there's white in there or a bright tan or a faded gray, which gets almost to be kind of white, and if you have those brighter colors in there, anytime you make a move, boy, even a bear or black bear is going to spot you. They're going to see that, if their eyes are visible to you, or even if it's from the side, they're going to see that motion. And the same with deer. Nowadays, I like dark camel with all dark colors in it. And my stool is painted with dark camel colors, and my clothing is dark camel. And the head net I wear is dark camel. And have less color, even in a tree. I mean, if you're bear hunting, and I always hunt from tree stands, bear hunting, right. Dark camel is the thing to wear, and so stay away from the light stuff. And stay away from fabrics that have a lot of nylon in it. Nylon reflects light, and it might look just fine, but if the sun's shining on it, it's going to be extremely visible. No matter what color is on there. Even if it was black, it would be extremely invisible. So when you're looking at clothing like that, you might take it, hold it under a bright light and see if it seems to reflect light, and stay away from that kind. You want kind of a flat feature there so it doesn't do that. Part of what you have to do when you're a ground level stand hunter like I am, besides sitting still a lot, you've got to cover skin. Human skin is easily spotted by bears and deer over great distances, and older bucks when they're out there searching for other deer. But easily identify hunters who have bare skin showing, and they can spot that at great distances through the woods. Okay. So your face should always be covered with a camel head net or mask while you're hunting deer. Especially older bucks, that's absolutely essential. And your hands should also you should have gloves on. They can be just brown gloves. They don't have to be camel. But when you move, like when you're getting ready to come to a full draw with your bow or getting your gun up, if your hands are bare, that bright skin is going to be spotted. They're going to see that. It makes a lot of difference when, you got to... I used to use camel powders and paint my face back in the old days in the 60s. They didn't have anything like that. I used to use burnt cork to get my face all plastered with dark colors. And yeah, that was a normal thing back in the 60s. But anyway, what you wear is really important. Think of your clothing as a blind.
Right.
This is your blind. This is a one-man blind, and one problem that comes with ground level hunting, a lot of deer that are really close. You just don't hardly breathe as long as any portion of one or both eyes are visible to you. Because if they see you move, even when they're not looking toward you, their eyes will pick up that motion. Especially, if you're not camouflaged well enough, and if your silhouette is not hidden well enough, and if you aren't skylighted or snowlighted, snowlighting is just as bad as skylighting. It's the same kind of thing. So that's one of the reasons I'm going to try one of those pop-up tent-like ground blinds this year. I've got one selected that I'm planning to buy at Cabela's. I kind of like the looks of that one and see how it works. It only weighs about 20 pounds.
Yes.
And give it a try. I see all these turkey hunters are getting their birds a lot using those things. And I was thinking, well, that might be kind of good because there's been too many times when I've had bucks close looking right at me and I didn't dare move. And then I didn't get a shot because by the time they got to a place where they couldn't see me, it was too late and they were gone.
Right.
But
let me ask you this: what's the breeding season, the breeding cycle here in phase 4? Once that cycle is completed, does a buck start traveling with the does almost as a comfort of a family, or is it more just he's soloed out by himself at this point?
Well, they become really social late, after phase 4. You get in, there's late season bow hunting and muzzleloader hunting. There's something to think about. But, our deer in Minnesota, they usually migrate to wintering areas around the 23rd of December. And from that time on, all the bucks, older bucks, kind of form a bachelor group. They usually will bed in the wintering area. Wintering areas, most of them are pretty good size, maybe 20, 30, 40 acres. And I know one that's 500 acres, and it gets several hundred deer in it every winter. And the bucks, older bucks, kind of stay away from all those other deer, the does, unless there's a doe in estrus. Now, the dominant bucks have a problem. They're the first to shed velvet, and once they shed velvet, then they're not interested in breeding anymore, and they become kind of docile. In fact, even yearling bucks can chase them away because they still have their antlers. Some of those yearlings will carry their antlers well into April. But they're always the first, and from that point on, they don't do any more breeding. So this is a chance for some of those other bucks, mature bucks, to breed. But there aren't many, you can imagine. 10% of those are bred in December, early December. And then 5% are bred in late December. Early December, or late December into early January. Well, you can have a 40-acre wintering area, and that means that maybe only one or two does in that area will be in heat. And they got all these bucks chasing around. Now, Gene and I've seen that several times. It's almost hilarious. That poor doe is running, and there's 12 bucks after her. And, she makes a jump, and 12 bucks jump after her. And it's kind of amazing to see that. But anyway, once they've gathered like that, and in wintering areas, they're really hard to get close to. You have to kind of stay away from them. In areas where usually they'll feed around edges and way out along edges of wintering areas if there's good browse, and usually that's one of the prerequisites of a good wintering area is plenty of good browse for them, and or they might gather in farm fields and eat crop residues or in clear cuts during that time, which usually has a lot of good browse in it. And so what you have to do when you're hunting deer during the late season like that, you have to get there early but don't try to get into the wintering area. You got to hunt around the edges and downwind or crosswind and hope some big buck comes along wants to feed where you are. But
right, for sure. You
have to be really cautious. There's a lot of eyes, ears, and noses there. They protect one another, and once one becomes alarmed, the whole bunch in there will be alarmed in seconds or minutes, and that's a frustrating thing when that happens. And then, of course, that spot won't work for a stand site for a long time after that happens. But
right, for sure.
Anyway, breeding periods occur during that time, both of them about 2 weeks long, and one in December and one in late last days of September and into the first week of January. My wife and I regularly photographed 2 does in Wisconsin that were always in heat on New Year's Day for years and years. And they always had a dominant buck with them. And so we got some really, sometimes other bucks around because they were in wintering areas. And we had some pretty fabulous photography sessions after those deer got to know us. There was one buck, and he became a dominant buck eventually, but when I first met him, he was a fawn, and he was not afraid at all of a human, and I was trying to get a picture with my old-fashioned camera, and I kept having to refocus it because he was coming toward me, and he just kept coming and coming and coming. And all of a sudden, I had a fawn nose print on the lens of my camera. He was like that. And we get up there. He was with most of the deer. We found these deer on a on a bluff in western Wisconsin, and it was surrounded by farms that were all posted. And one farmer gave us permission to go across his land to get up on the bluff top where we could spend time. In the first couple of years that we were there, we didn't get many close-range shots of deer up there. They were all way over there somewhere. But that little buck that lived on this place, he was always friendly. He always came close. We had a lot of pictures of him, and he was growing up. And usually we'd bring some snacks with us for during the day, and things like potato chips. And I remember throwing out potato chips, throwing some on the ground, backing away, and that buck would come up to check on what we gave him. And holy cow, he did! He loved potato chips. And then one day I had M&Ms with peanuts in them, and he was real interested to hear that bag rattling, sort of like it does on potato chips. And so he was curious about what I had, probably thinking he was going to get some potato chips. Well, it was M&M, so I just tossed some of those in the snow, and he came over and ate them. And man, his eyes lit. Oh, did he love those peanuts? So he got so that whenever he saw us, he expected that. And other deer would see him around us like that, and they finally got used to the idea that we were harmless. And about the third, I know there's one big buck here. It took 3 years before I finally got a really good close-range shot at him. And after that, we had pretty easy photography sessions up there. And my wife got attacked by one. I had to run down the truck and get some more film one day. And while I was gone, two big bucks started battling, and they were just going at it tooth and nail. And she got some really nice photos of those bucks battling. And then a little bit later, the loser spotted her and walked up to her and pressed his antlers against her chest. And extremely dangerous situation. And Gene knew that the worst thing you could do is push those antlers away or touch them, even touch them. If you did that buck would have bored right in and probably kill you. And people do get killed by bucks like that. But anyway, so she just kept talking softly to it and backing away. And it even backed her into a barbed wire fence at one point, but she was able to turn and keep backing away and talking. And finally, the buck either got disgusted because he wasn't going to get any fighting and walked away, and maybe his ego was okay now after losing to that other buck. But it finally left him. But that was on that bluff, so that was a potentially really bad situation up there. But
gotcha.
We, the photography we did was as much fun as hunting, and we did a lot of it, and we started in the wintertime. We started spending 3 months each winter down in that desert Southwest, from Texas and New Mexico and Arizona, and even had a place where we regularly studied cows deer. They call them cows in Arizona in the Sonora Desert, and two of our favorite places to study and photograph whitetails were in the Panhandle of Texas at Buffalo Lakes National Wildlife Refuge, which had a campground. Nobody was ever there in the wintertime, so we had it all to ourselves. And then Palaguro Canyon, which had a lot of deer and muleys up on top and whitetails in the bottom and a lot of turkey there. And it was a fun place. And we had one area that we spent a lot of time in every year studying those whitetails. And the whitetails down there have some different habits. A lot of open country, plains and high plains country and in the Panhandle. And they tend to remain in groups year-round, and I don't know why. But I see a little bit of that happening here in Minnesota, and where I've never seen it before. And up in my wolf country study area, we've been seeing that for several years now, and which is kind of amazing. Which include the groups including more than one doe. Usually does have their own individual ranges, but it seems like we're seeing more of those groups sticking together now, and it probably has a lot to do with the wolves. But it's a new behavior pattern in our northern deer. But anyway, what else would you like to know?
Well, I think we covered quite a bit of the 5
Yes, we
phases
did.
there, and I think I'm not surprised. You did a great job. Let's put it that way.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I enjoy this. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy teaching hunters to be better hunters, more successful, selective hunter. Teach them how to hunt big bucks. Teach them to hunt the most elusive whitetails in the world. That's our big dominant breeding bucks. And but they have some vulnerabilities at times that you can play on, But teach them to hunt close to older bucks every half day. We change stand sites every half day. Our camp rule is if you hunt within easy shooting range of very fish tracks and or droppings of a big buck for a half day and don't see that buck, it knows you're there.
Gotcha.
You're wasting your time from that time on. So we change stand sites every half day, which we can do, and it's always, close to very fresh tracks and droppings, which we can do when you hunt at ground level and use a stool and use natural cover at ground level for to hide your silhouette and your movements and that kind of thing. So. Boy, does that make a difference on buck hunting. And I had open heart surgery 5 weeks ago, and I'm getting to the point now where I'm working in the yard every day, getting my gardens up to date. I'm way behind right now, but I'm getting there, and I'm feeling better every day. But I get tired easy. And, I never used to get tired easy, but I am 81, and I suppose you can expect things like that.
Yeah.
But
so, Doc,
but and it's not going to slow me down for deer hunting this year. I'm going to be better off than I've been in years.
All right, I like the sounds of that. That's what I want to hear out of you. To keep on going. Doc, if we wanted to get some of your books and learn some more about what you've got going on now, where would we go?
Well, you can go to my website. And, there's all detailed information about each of the books, and some are no longer available. People are finding how to print books on eBay and spending a lot of money on them. It's not uncommon for people to spend $250 for a second edition, which we talked about today. And some have paid $1,000 for books that are in mint condition. So. Yeah, I was thinking, boy, my books are a good investment, better than the Bible. But anyway, go to my website and you'll find all you need to know about it. And if you order it from me, there's other people selling some of my books. Used ones usually. You don't find them in antique stores or bookstores because they don't end up there. Somebody always, you just don't find them there. But if you order them from me, I'll send you autographed copies. But go to my website, and my website address is www. And then it's all small letters. Dr. Ken Nordberg now is Dr. Nordberg at on deerhunting.com. It's Dr. Nordberg on deerhunting.com.
Got it. Awesome. Very, very
and
good.
it's a big website. It's got years of magazine articles I've written in it. It's kind of an encyclopedia on deer hunting. So you can spend a lot. You can spend days and days on my website.
You get lost.
So, but you got everything is there. You can download an order sheet, and my books are still a bargain in prices, and pretty soon that big tent will come out. That's going to be more expensive because it's about, after we get all the photography in it, it'll probably be a 600-page book. And it's going to be a big one. But it's been a while since I've written a deer book, and we've learned a lot in the interim. And so there was a lot to write about.
All right.
A lot of new things. A lot of the things that we just got done talking about.
Beautiful. All right. We'll be on the lookout for that, and we'll make a recommendation to all of our listeners to go pick that up. I'm sure they'll be interested in learning about whatever you wrote in that new book.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Doc. I appreciate you taking the time to spend a couple hours with us, actually, on the Big Buck podcast.
Well, we could have done 4 days.
We could have. And, you know, yeah. I may hit you up again because I feel like we just touched the surface, even though we went pretty deep on a couple subjects.
Well, anytime.
Awesome.
Anytime.
Well, I would say that if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, you might want to do that because when this is all said and done, I believe that this might be the most comprehensive deer hunting part 1, part 2 show we've ever done, solely based off of how to take a doctor's 40, 50-year study of whitetail, compile it into a bunch of almanacs, specifically with the one we talked about, and then take that knowledge to the field. And this applies to the new guy and to the experienced hunter. All of it is relevant. In fact, when I edited this show, this is probably one of the few shows where, you know, I'll go through and I'll look for little spots that I didn't like or things that didn't come out quite right. In this case, I wasn't doing that necessarily. I was going back to re-listen to what he said because, like, I can use that in my hunting attire. I can use that tomorrow or planning for my hunts in the fall. These are all things I need to know now. So absolutely blew my mind. Thank you to Dr. Ken Nordberg. And I hope he's feeling better after his heart surgery. I'm sure he says he's feeling great and that he's ready for another season in the deer woods.
Yeah, for sure, Jay. Just amazing, the knowledge that the doc has, and we sure do appreciate him spilling his guts right here on the show.
Yeah, we hit it off, but I don't believe that is the end of our interviews with Dr. Ken Nordberg. I think we're going to see him back on the show at some point because he does have his 10th edition coming out, his 10th Almanac, so that's supposed to be the most comprehensive book that's out there, according to him. So we'll get him back on. But, man, what an amazing, amazing guy. So, Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
We do, and I'm going outside what I normally would talk about a little bit, Jay, going into my personal hunting experience and one of my favorite all-time things to do.
The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
This time of year, I take and just grab one of your articles of hunting clothing. Don't put no scent spray on it. Don't put nothing on it. And it's something that maybe you're retiring or you're no longer going to use, or take it out and just set it in your tree stand. And the reason why is the deer over time will adjust to smelling something new or fresh, or you figure you go all year to hunting season. What do? You climb up in your stand, let's say October.
Right.
Some people September. That right there is a fresh new thing in the tree stand.
Right.
You know, let's keep them on the same smells the whole year.
Right.
So take an article of clothing. Don't juice it up with scent cover or anything like that. But you can use anything that you plan to use this September for spray-wise. Squirt it on there.
Yep.
That way they are somewhat adjusted to that smell. Regardless of what you're spraying, it still stinks.
Gotcha. So you're basically telling
them. It has
them,
an odor.
You're educating them to the fact that this particular smell that is unique to you is not to be feared.
That's exactly right. So if they come in and they're eating on, let's say you're putting out corn, mineral site, you're hunting over mineral site or a water area, put something out there that smells like you right now.
That's a great idea. I've never
That way, October,
right.
September, October, you climb that tree stand, you're not just scaring the death out of these deer.
Right. There's nothing to alert them.
You know, everybody says scent lock, scent blocker, cover sprays, ozonics, all that. Well, I mean, you know, it all works. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But it's that initial hit of it that they can't adjust to right away.
Right. Dude, that's awesome. That's a great tip. I love that. Very nice. Yeah. Very, very cool. Thanks to Morse's Sporting Goods for sponsoring the Chubby Tines Tip of the Week. And Dusty, has been absolutely mind-blowing episode part 1 and 2 with Dr. Ken Nordberg. So what I'd like to know is where can we find you when you're not hanging out here talking deer hunting with me?
Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. You can shoot me an email right here at dusty@bigbuckregistry.com, or hit me up on Instagram @ChasingAntler. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Best place is to shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com. They'll come right to me, and I can respond and answer any questions you might have or respond to any feedback. If you'd like to check out our Facebook page, where we have about 200 and almost at 250,000 followers, it's bigbuckregistry.com/Facebook, and it's Big Buck Registry is unique across all our social media platforms. So it's Twitter, twitter.com/Big Buck Registry, Instagram, same thing, Instagram.com/Big Buck Registry, so you can see the pattern. And we're on YouTube. We're also on, I think those are all the places we're on. But if you would like to have your buck featured on the Big Buck Registry, you shot a nice deer anytime in the last lifetime of yours, just send it to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, or go there. Go to the bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and you'll get all of the instructions on how to submit a buck to the Big Buck Registry. If you don't have email, you can just submit it through Facebook, through the messaging system to us, and we'll take care of it from there. And if you would like to be a patron of this show, we can certainly use the help. And all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/donate. And there's a list of every single thing that you'll get and different levels of rewards that you'll have. And by going there, and it's anywhere from hats and T-shirts and other tchotchke that you can get for being a patron of the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast, powered by USA Trail Cams. Dusty, this has been fantastic. And thanks for joining me and hanging out once again.
Absolutely, Jay. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
This is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.